all that comes down to probably like two key things. I think the first thing is curiosity, and the second thing is having an open mind. And if you have both of those things, you can extrapolate that to any area in your life.
Hey guys, welcome to Millionaire Brand Creation. I'm your host, Michael Banovac, and super excited to have a friend of mine, Cameron Steiner, on. Cameron is a avid collector. We met each other at a watch event because he has an amazing collection for someone as young as he is, as well as a keen eye in design and antiques and architecture, and just kind of wanted to bring you on and talk a little bit about your story. How are you doing today, Cameron?
I'm good. Pleasure to be here. Thanks so much for having me. It's been nice to get to know you in the short time that we have known each other, but I feel like a lot of our interests kind of overlap, so it makes sense.
100%. Yeah. And thank you so much for coming on because what this podcast is really for is young and old people looking to kind of maybe hit the reset button in their business or their lives and showcase people like yourself that have done wealth and kind of give an inlay into the lives of someone that thinks differently. If you could take us back into your childhood and what kind of gave you that drive to become an entrepreneur at a young age.
My story is probably pretty conventional. Every side of my family from both ways were entrepreneurs, and it was just kind of the way that I was brought up. My mom's side of the family, my grandfather started a car business where he eventually became one of the bigger Porsche dealers in New York with a bunch of different dealerships and a lot of the exotic cars too. So became the dealer for brands like Lamborghini and Bugatti and Koenigsegg and all these amazing brands. And he started that business with nothing. And as the legend has it, my grandmother, when the Rolls-Royce dealership came up for or franchise rather came up for bid, she told my grandpa, "Don't come home until you get it." And and that's kind of how the cookie crumbled from there. I have an uncle that runs that business now, and they have a lot of amazing car dealerships throughout New York and Manhattan, Brooklyn, and the tri-state area. And on my dad's side, my dad's always been an entrepreneur. He was in the kitchen cabinet business in New Jersey. They were doing a lot of the high rises in Manhattan. Moved to Arizona shortly after I was born, and they started another business in plastics and storage containers and all this sort of stuff, kind of competing with Rubbermaid. And that business has kind of evolved over time into different products as the market ebbs and flows. Both sides of my family were always so happy working for themselves. Not that you can't be not working for yourself, but I always saw that. I saw the freedom that they had, and I always admired that.
So at a young age, seeing that success and seeing that, what about it intrigued you? I would assume you were raised mostly around adults because you're an old soul. I thought I was the young one, but obviously you're slightly younger than me. I'm just shocked at your thought process at your age. What kind of gave
Yeah.
you that zest for culture and elegance and old world things?
I would say for sure my grandparents in New York, as well as my mother, always tastemakers and
Mm.
always had great taste in everything, from clothing to style to architecture to all those things. And they just always had a keen eye for all of that stuff. And I always admired it. If you pay close enough attention and appreciate those things, you'll pick up on it too. Had I never been interested or cared about any of that stuff or learned why it was important to them, and I never cared to bother, I probably wouldn't be interested in it as much. But growing up, I really just had a zest to learn all about that and understand why it was so exciting for them to go ahead and buy this piece of glass or make these changes to their homes or all those sorts of things. And I think I just latched on from an early age. And I would say I loved, especially now that everyone knows I'm crazy about watches, my grandfather would wear these small Cartiers and these small, Patek Philippe Calatrava style watches. He'd wear it with a ball cap and a denim shirt and shorts lounging around the house, and he'd wear it with a suit. And I love seeing the versatility of these small dress watches be worn for sport, be worn for leisure, be worn for dress. And I was like, wow, this is so cool. Why don't I see more people doing this? And I just fell in love with that. And I would definitely say the area that they live in New York is this very equestrian Gatsby style area where big farm properties and horses and all these things and hedge gardens and all that sort of stuff. And if you appreciate any of that, you can't help but put a smile on when you see it.
It's almost a different language. It's a different world. And that's one of the reasons we do, this podcast is a lot of people aren't fortunate enough to see that world. It's almost the soft skills, so to speak. Can you
Right.
touch upon that in the worlds, that we're fortunate enough to be in and, at a young age and seeing that maybe some people haven't seen networking and how important it is to learn those soft skills or follow those passions to get into these groups and talk to these people and maybe make a difference in your life professionally or personally.
Absolutely. I think all that comes down to probably like two key things. I think the first thing is curiosity, and the
Mm,
second thing is having an open mind. And if you have both of those things, you can extrapolate that to any area in your life, whether it's business or whether it's personal. I was always personally curious, and I was always willing to have an open mind to experience those things. I mean, I have two older brothers, and they can't seem to understand why my favorite activity on the weekend is to go to antique shops when they're watching, football games. I'm curious about those things, and I like to open up my mind to different styles and different eras, and see how the challenge for me is how can I find something that I love and bring it into my own home, right? So that's on the
mm,
personal side of things. And I think when it comes to business, the reason that curiosity and having an open mind really works for anybody is because it always comes down to the one thing that I always tell people is the worst someone's going to say is no. And they may say it in, so many few words or tell you to go screw yourself. But at the end of the day, it all means the same thing. They're saying no. And that's the worst case scenario. So if you're curious and you have an open mind, I think that you can relate it to that concept of the worst thing someone's ever going to tell you is no. And if you are curious and you do have an open mind, then you'll go for whatever.
mm. I would assume you had more than one mentor in your life, but if you did, can you tell us who it was, the relationship you had to that person, and what you learned from them? What was the key takeaway of something that they told you? You're like, whoa, that really changed the trajectory of my life.
Yeah, I would say having certain family members as mentors is not always the most common, and it's not always the most, I guess, simple and easy. If every family's messy in a lot of ways,
Yeah.
and you have to take everything with a grain of salt. So when it comes down to taking advice, whether it's financially or all those things, you have to have thick skin. I have many mentors within my family. My dad he's a tough one, but he is a very smart person. You have to have thick skin when you're talking to him. But then I also have my grandparents who were both very savvy and smart and always offered good advice that came with compassion too. If it comes to maybe making a purchase on something, one side would say, no, you're completely out of your mind for paying that much. Wait it out for the right price and the right thing. And the other side would say, that's a couple extra bucks if it makes you happy. It looks okay, go for it. Having other mentors, I've tried to have as many as possible. There's definitely someone who's been like a father to me in a lot of ways. His name's Jim Riggs. He's taken me in as his family growing up. They are my sick. I've traveled everywhere with them. I go to their house for Sunday dinners. He is definitely one of the people that I call that's outside of family to be a soundboard for decisions and all that sort of stuff. And I think it's less about getting to the point of what you want to hear, but having a sound conversation with people of let's take everybody's opinion out of it and look at what's on the paper and see if that makes sense. That's kind of the way that I roll. They don't have to be, the right mentor necessarily or in the right field or anything like that, but someone who can offer a valid and sound opinion.
Yeah, it's interesting how many successful people in their lives have to hit the reset button at different times. And what I've noticed too is the most successful individuals are usually their biggest cheerleader and also their biggest critic. Relay some pieces of advice that you might have for some young person, maybe even younger than you or me, coming up on how they could start to become a collector or become knowledgeable in this space.
I think first and foremost, collecting to me is a place that I get to expel excess mental real estate that I have, right?
Mm,
We're all so busy during the day, during the weekends, between work and family and extracurriculars and all that sort of stuff that for me, collecting has become just a hobby. And when I have extra space to do that sort of stuff, that's great. You don't have to necessarily collect something to do that. You can have a million different hobbies. I always have people say to me, oh, I wish I could collect something. Well, you can. And a lot of people think just because I collect watches and other antiques for the house that they have to open up their checkbook and their pull out their credit card and start financing things to do that.
right.
And it's so not true. You just have to find an area that you're really, really passionate about or that you might want to learn in. For the person who's younger, my suggestion is I don't care if you care about rocks. If rocks is what you like, go outside and go find some. Go online, go on eBay, go on all these auction sites, right?
Yes.
And go look for rocks. It does not matter. If you're someone who is middle aged that has a collection that needs a reset, that's when you can start looking at your collection of things and saying, am I gravitating to all these things on a daily basis. And
Hmm.
if you're not, that's when you start to pare down and say, okay, I could get rid of this and I can get rid of this. This is something I can't get rid of, right? So you start to kind of curate, which is really a special synthesis in the idea of collecting, is when you can get to the curating stage after hoarding all these things for so many
Yes.
years, right? Is when you can look at your collection and say, okay, I'm ready to curate. I'm ready to start being able to have a finite amount of things that I can reach for every day or use every day or look at every day and be really excited about. But at the end of the day, no matter what age you are, it does not come down to money when it comes to collecting.
Hmm.
Collecting is about just finding something that you're interested and passionate about. It could be notebooks. You could go on eBay and find vintage notebooks from a hotel in Paris. And that would be a really cool thing that you could probably get for 20 or $30 if you wanted to collect notebooks, right? You could probably find an ashtray from the Ritz in Paris that they used to make in the 80s and the 70s and the 60s, and you could buy it for 20, $30. And you have a little piece of history of that hotel, which is an iconic hotel in your home. And you put it outside or you put it on your desk or whatever it may be. And that's a really cool place for people to start collecting is vintage ashtrays and even vintage coasters, all that sort of stuff. You can go off the deep end with anything.
That's a good segue into your podcast, right? Collectors Gene Radio. How long have you been doing that?
Collectors Gene Radio has been around for, gosh, I started recording at the beginning of the pandemic. A lot of these people that I was interviewing were really taking back, taking a few steps back as to what they were doing their day to day. So I knew that they had some time to sit down with someone like me and chat about it. And the idea and impetus for doing it was some of these people I was already talking with online because they're other collectors, obviously. Some of the people I really wanted to have in my circle and people that I could look back on and be like, wow, I can't believe I was able to speak with this person because from a
Yes.
simple standpoint of geographics, I can't necessarily go meet all these people and try and meet them in person. The idea from the beginning was have celebrities and high profile collectors of anything of any sort come on the show and talk about less about what they have and more about why they have it. Because not everybody wants to open up the safe and say, hey, look what I got,
Right,
which
right,
I
right.
totally understand. Some people do, but a lot of people don't. And so the impetus was, I just want these guys to open up about their passion. I want them to be talking to me with a smile on their face, knowing that I might not be a car collector, but they know that I can appreciate what they're talking about.
What are some of the noteworthy guests that you've had, and what are your takeaways that you learned from
I
them?
had one was Paul Feig. He's a writer, director, actor. He did Bridesmaids. He was in the movie Heavyweights when he was a lot younger, which
He's
is a
got great
favorite of mine.
style too. He did Blake Lively, didn't he? In The Simple Favor.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah, wow. He's got great taste. Awesome.
Yeah, and that was kind of the cool thing about him is he's this guy who's big time Hollywood writer and director, and this guy could probably have just about anything that he wants. What he collects is walking sticks. And
Wow.
because he's one of the last best dressed guys in Hollywood. He shows up in a three-piece custom suit every day to work. It is mandatory for him at least. And not only does he collect suits, but he collects these walking sticks. Not because he's injured and he needs them, but because he likes walking with them, number one. And number two, he uses them as an affectation when he's directing to point and whatnot. You could see Blake Lively using them in a couple of the movies. Those are his from his personal collection. And I just found that so cool that someone like him who could have everything would collect that stuff. So that's one noteworthy guest. Another one is Nate Berkus. He's a celebrity interior designer.
Mhm. Very
He,
talented.
yeah, extremely talented. Maybe the best taste out of anybody I know. He has products in Target. He has his own line in living spaces. I mean, if you Google him, you'll know exactly who he is.
He has a
But
famous partner, right?
he does. His partner is Jeremiah Brent, also a very, very well-known interior designer. The two of them together are a powerhouse and they have their separate firms. They do stuff together. It's really, really neat. Nate is an amazing furniture collector. He's used them in his own homes. He's used them in his own projects, but he's got such a great eye for design. He collects books. He's got a great watch collection. So we spoke about collecting as a whole because for someone like him who is doing these projects all over the world, he has to source vintage furniture for his clients. Like he is forced to do that, but he also likes to do it for himself, which is really cool because some people get burnt out on doing that stuff for their job. So that was a really neat one. And then I'll drop a little sneak peek for an episode that I just recorded yesterday that I'll be releasing soon, which was with Mario Andretti, maybe the most versatile and one of the best, greatest race car drivers of our time.
And it was interesting too about collectors or people with a fine eye. Like Paul is a great example. The moment I saw his films, it reminded me of Tom Ford in a way where it's very stylistically dialed in.
Yep.
And what I look at when someone pays attention to the fine details is they have a more curated mind when it comes to the way that you showcase the world. How important is it when you present yourself to the outside world, let's say in business or your personal life? Obviously, you have a beautiful wife, you just got married.
Thank you.
Congratulations. How important is it to present yourself in a way to the outside world in order to attract certain people into your life? Can you touch upon that a little bit?
Sometimes you have to play the part, right?
Hmm.
I'm a casual guy. I work from home. I never have to put a suit on. I love suits. I love dressing up. There's nothing that I love more than a black tie event.
Same
Absolutely
here.
nothing I love more, but I don't get to do it often. If I was going to have a coffee with Paul Feig, I'd put on a suit, which would be completely out of the norm for me, right? I think you have to play to your strengths and play to the part of who am I going to have this coffee with today? Who am I speaking with today? A lot of times I try and be casual. It's the same way that I relate it to people who go in and get a job. They send their resume in, people get 1,000 resumes, they don't even get the chance. I'm a big believer in put the person in the room, talk to them in person, and figure out then if they're not a good fit. First off, resumes are fluffed all the time, right? And so I could have
Right.
a whole separate podcast on that. I think you have to play the part of, okay, if I'm going to go meet Paul Feig, I need to be presentable in a certain way that he would take me seriously as I take him seriously. I wouldn't be offended personally if he showed up in a t-shirt and jeans, but I think he would be offended because he's an old school guy if I didn't.
What do you think of this aspect of dressing for the person you want to become? Does that resonate with you at all?
Yeah, it does to a certain extent for sure. Even if I work from home, I'm in a pair of pants and a shirt, whether it's a long sleeve knit or whether it's a button down. I dress up every day to an extent. I always like to look and feel good about what I have on. And that's just a personal thing. I think there is something to that. I mean, there's studies out there somehow that show people that put something normal on for work every day, even if it's a nice pair of pants, a decent shirt, that they're somehow more productive than someone who's in sweatpants all day. I think at the end of the day, you have to just be confident in
Yes.
yourself.
And when you look at collectors in totality, what are some of the main reasons they get into collecting? And do the collections that they have elicit conversation that introduce them to other people?
Absolutely to both. I think that the first thing is people that I've interviewed personally that are collectors are people that have become very successful in life. From a simple virtue of time, they weren't necessarily collectors the same way that they collect now. Most of the people that I've had on the podcast and the end of every podcast, I ask each guest whether or not they feel they were born with the collector's gene. Most of them do feel that they were born with the collector's gene because when they were kids, they were collecting baseball cards, they were collecting even jewelry back then, they were collecting clothes, they were collecting all sorts of things. I personally do feel that people are born collectors. I think the level at which you collect is something that ebbs and flows over time as your finances over time and the more things that you're exposed to and get interested into. There's no way that I could possibly have had the watch collection or antiques or anything like that that I have now when I was 10 collecting
Right, right.
baseball cards and action figures, you know. The people that I think were born with the collector's gene do attract other collectors over time.
Mm,
You are naturally able to pick out, in my opinion, somebody who collects something because you can tell when someone is at the store and they're spending so much time looking at an item, right? They're studying it, they're interested in it, they're asking questions about it. You know that that person cares enough that they have other stuff at home. And so I think as a collector, you do attract other collectors and I think you also seek them out. I seek them out every
yes.
time I bring someone on my podcast. I seek them out as we went to that watch dinner together. And I want all these people in my circle because we share a
Absolutely.
lot of the same values, not necessarily personally, because I don't know them, everybody yet, super personal,
Right.
but you share a lot of the same values that you care about something that is handmade, that is crafted, that has a story, that costs money, that you have to work hard to pay for to
Yes.
enjoy. And there's a reason for that.
Yeah, it's almost another layer of elegance or another layer of appreciation. And for me, I like someone that has a keen eye because I feel like I'm going to learn something. That to me is the
Right.
most exciting. I love to be educated. I love to educate, but I love to feel educated on things that I know nothing about. And I'm sure
For
you're the
sure.
same way. You're 30, right?
Yes.
How is it as a 30-year-old? Because I'm 34, I'm a little bit older than you. How have you been able to connect and be at the same on the same page as people your own age?
Really difficult. But
Yeah,
I,
so
but
I figured.
like
Yeah.
I have an amazing group of friends that is ever growing. It's been growing since I've made these friends forever ago. We are a really close group of friends. It is a running joke in our friend group that I'd rather be reading a Homes and Garden magazine than watching the Super Bowl. It is
You and
it
me
is
both.
yeah, it is never more evident that I am not that interested in the things that most of my friends, if not all of my friends, for the most part, are interested in. And that's okay. I will go sit at a sports bar and watch sports with them. I will have nothing of value to add when they're getting excited about something, the same way they would have nothing to probably add when I'm getting excited about winning an auction on something, right? Most people would probably be outcasted in a lot of ways growing up, but I was lucky enough to have an amazing group of friends. I'd like to think I have the best friends in the world. And I know a lot of other people feel that way too, but that's because we've all found friends that are understanding that I'm not going to always go meet them or I'm never in their fantasy football groups, but I'm excited to see who lost and what they have to do.
I mean, I assume most of your friends outside of your, initial friend group are much older and, you learn from them, right? I grew up amongst adults my whole life and I was just fascinated with adult behavior.
Yeah,
Being a child never excited me for some reason. But the idea that I find most fascinating is at a young age, and your mindset is that of a 50, 60, 70-year old. Your body is that of a younger person. And your mind gravitates towards people that I would assume appreciates and thinks the same way that you do. When I'm out in the world, I'm curious if you feel the same way. When I see someone that takes great pride in, let's say, their appearance or their watch or their car or their home or their interior, to me, it's almost like a surprise. It's an excitement. It's like, oh, wow, this person thinks maybe similarly to me. And that excites me as to there's something here that we can build off of. Maybe we can have a friendship. Do you ever feel that way when you meet people out and about?
absolutely. It also comes down to the curiosity thing that we spoke about earlier is that if you're not curious to go and meet somebody or say hello to somebody or comment on their watch or their suit or their shoes or their belt or their car, whatever it may be, then you're missing out. The amount of times that I've been out in public and commented on something of somebody's. And we've just gotten into amazing conversations that's led to coffees, that's led to networking, that's led to all these other things
Yeah.
that I would be remiss to say if most of the time it's not worth it. And it's not a transactional thing. I'm not looking for anything, but I'm a human being. And if I see something I like, I let the person know. And it's as simple as that. And you have to realize that it's it's really easy to get along with a lot of people. You just have to be open-minded.
Yeah, it was interesting when I had on this podcast, I had the ex-president of Frank Mueller and Gerard Perigo on. He had a
Sure.
really interesting quote. He was at a European dinner, I think, with Frank Mueller himself, and he said, "My watch says about me what I don't say about myself, or I don't want to say about myself." And I thought that was really interesting about all aspects of life, right? Your home, your clothing, your watch, your ashtrays, your cutlery, whatever it is that you have a passion for, it almost shows a sense of pride, right? A sense when I saw your collection at your age, I was blown away because I was thinking to myself, this person acts like they're 55 or 60. I mean, the Piagets, the Cartiers, the
Yep.
old world elegant, right? I thought I was looking at a Ralph Lauren collection. It's
Yeah.
almost creating a dreamlike state for someone that appreciates it. Can you touch upon that and what that means to you?
Yeah. I mean, look, at the end of the day, the amount of people that I've had on the podcast, I always ask them, who's the GOAT, right? Who do they look up to in the collecting world? The majority of them have all said Ralph Lauren. And
Wow. I love Ralph. He's
he's the
amazing.
best.
Yeah.
He's the
Yeah.
best. And, when I was in college, I got to work for him and be inside that world of elegance and in New York and just see all of that and live it and breathe it and smell it. And you can't not appreciate that guy. And if you have any interest in it at all, he becomes everybody's hero. He is
Mm.
everybody's hero sartorially, financially, of course, his level of taste, everything. You look up to that guy. I saw that from an early age. He was buying a lot of cars from my family, and I learned about Ralph from a really young age. And once you start If you go on a Google search and you just Google Ralph Lauren's Bedford, New York home,
Oh, it's beautiful.
and you look inside that place,
Yeah.
your tastes will completely change. If you aren't already into that stuff and you look at that home, your tastes will completely change.
Yeah.
And same thing with my grandparents. They were just the same way that their taste was just different than everybody else for their time. They did what they wanted to do, what they thought looked good. And that's how I got interested in a lot of these Cartiers and stuff. And I bought them a long time ago before people were really interested. Not that that's what I was looking for, but when you buy what you like, and I always preach this to people that want to collect, because they're always like, how'd you get this? And why do you want that? And whatever. I'm like, because I buy what I like. And if you buy what you like, you will always do well. If for whatever reason down the road you have to let something go out of your collection and sell it, if you buy what you like, you will always do well. And I think that that's kind of the important lesson. And I look at someone like Ralph, and he only buys what he likes. He has his own taste. He has his own style. You look at his car collection. The guy has, I mean,
The best of the best of the best.
the best of the best of the best. Everything is like three colors. It's like black, silver, red of everything, and it's amazing. It's truly amazing.
We got a couple minutes left. And if you could kind of summarize what we talked about today, or maybe leave us with a quote that resonates with you, what would you leave for the audience that's a key takeaway of kind of the last 30 minutes or so?
Yeah, I think a couple things when it comes to collecting is always buy what you like. Always buy the best that you can for the money that you have.
Yes.
And always be searching for things that interest you that don't interest everybody else. It's really easy to buy things that are of interest to everybody else and get caught up in that, and that's when you kind of get stuck with the hot potato. So my advice is buy what you like no matter what it is. I don't care if it's watches, I don't care if it's art, I don't care if it's wine. Buy what you like and you'll never have a hard time getting rid of it if you ever have to, but you will most importantly enjoy it. The other thing is the worst anybody will ever tell you is no. So don't be afraid to negotiate, which is my favorite thing to do when it comes to collecting anything. I don't care if it's 50 cents that they give me off. I love the aspect of negotiating.
Love that.
I had someone on my podcast, by the way, who told me the same thing. His favorite thing is to negotiate, and he's not looking to ruin somebody financially to the point where they can't put food on the table. It's just give me $5, give me free shipping. I don't care what it is. I just
Yeah.
want to feel good that I got something off for spending all this time arguing with you. And
Yeah.
so I love negotiating. And the worst anybody will ever tell you is no. And that is something that could be extrapolated into a million different aspects of your life.
Love that. Where can they follow you, Cameron? Where can they get to know you better? What's the best way for the audience to serve you?
Follow me on my Instagram, which is just at Cameron Ross Steiner, all one word. You can follow Collectors Gene Radio. It's on Apple and Spotify. There should be a website hopefully coming soon. Some other exciting things coming soon with the podcast. So definitely keep an eye there. And yeah, those are the two best spots.
Awesome. Well, hey, thank you so much for taking the time. I learned a lot and I learned more about you, more importantly. So I really appreciate you coming on today.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Hey,
And looking forward to getting a coffee soon and talking more about this stuff.
let's do it. All right. See you, Cameron. Thanks again.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.